is present from birth to about 8 weeks, so it doesn't last nearly as long as Perez. And this one must diminish, or we will see children who tend to wiggle a lot in their chairs, because anytime they lean back against their chair, they go into this little spasm. And so these are children who tend to wiggle a lot. And we see this sometimes in children, if we make them sit still, then they're concentrating so hard on, okay, I can't wiggle, I can't move, I can't wiggle, and then they're not learning anything. So some children have to do what I call the wiggles in order to help that they can actually concentrate, because otherwise they're spending all their energy trying to override this reflex. This assists in the birth process because once we have the shoulders through the pelvic outlet, and now we have to get the hips through those muscles in the pelvic outlet. So just like we did with the shoulders when we put one up, now if we put one hip up, that can narrow the hip diameter and change the relationship so that the baby can continue to descend down the birth canal. Through both this one in Gallant's and in Perez, the way we get this stimulation on the back and on the spinal cord is through the contraction of the mother's uterus. And both of these happen simultaneously pretty much, that as the baby is being squeezed, we're getting that stimulation on the spine and on those muscles at the same time. So now that we have the baby that has been born, we're going to look at a few reflexes that are important for the babies to survive after birth as well. Some of these do persist, so my strict definition of that these are reflexes that diminish, there's a few exceptions here, but we'll see that they're important to the overall development of the nervous system as well. The first reflex is the blink reflex. And this one is very simple. If you shine a light in the baby's eyes, they will close them, as would most of us. This is present from birth through about the first year. And this gives protection to the sensitive and developing eyes from a sudden onslaught and bright stimulus from this new world that the baby has entered. It has been dark and watery, and while there is some light that can enter through, sensation of light that can enter through the mother's body and through the muscles, it is a new experience that they're having when they are born and they see this light for the first time. And so this helps to protect those sensitive components as they adapt and grow and get used to the bright sunshine that we see. The next reflexes are again a set that relate and go together. We have rooting and sucking reflexes. For the rooting reflex, if you stroke your finger along the baby's cheek from the ear towards the mouth, they will turn their head that way and open their mouth wide because they're looking to eat. And then for the sucking reflex, if you touch your finger to the bottom lip a little bit and sort of move it, then they will open their mouth wide. And then if you were to put your finger inside their mouth with the pad of your finger on the roof so that your fingernail doesn't cut the roof of your mouth, then they will start to suck and it should be pulled further up and in. These are important because this is how the baby receives their nourishment. When we do have interference in this system, like if there is a subluxation is a term we use in the chiropractic world for when their nervous system isn't working correctly and there is a wrong message being sent from the brain to the muscles or organs that system is supposed to work with. So if there's interference in any of the cervical or neck nerves, or especially in the cranial nerves that affect the sucking and swallowing reflexes, then sometimes these reflexes don't work very well on children. And we have to actually work with them to help teach them how to suck and how to move their tongue correctly so that they can eat and be nourished. We also will then check and try to remove that interference with the adjustments that we give so that this whole system will work well, so that it will be a thriving baby. These reflexes are present from birth until about 3 to 4 months, and sometimes you can still see them sucking when they're sleeping. And then the baby will still retain the ability of how to do this, but at that point it becomes a voluntary action. The next reflex is the Moro reflex or the startle reflex. For this test, if we hold the baby securely, but then suddenly lower them towards the ground, you will see this kind of a response. They will open their eyes wide, they will extend their head back, they'll open their arms and spread their fingers and bend their knees, and then as you continue lowering them, then they will do the opposite. Then they will flex their head forward and bring their arms into their chest and curl up into a very protective position. That one you can probably also see if a baby is experiencing a new sound, or it's called the startle reflex, because if it's when they are startled by anything that's new, which as they are experiencing this new world that they have entered, they're discovering all sorts of new things. So what happens is that they need to be, eventually, as they hear a sound over and over, or as they come across a certain stimulus over and over repeatedly, then they will cease to have that Moro reflex or that startle every time it happens. We call that the adaptation response. This is present from about birth till 4 to 6 months. And this reflex is very important because it can give us an overall evaluation of the nervous system in an infant. Basically, if this reflex is missing or it isn't working, then that tells us a lot about the nervous system functioning and that there may be some major problems there. If it reoccurs after a severe injury, it could indicate that there has been nervous system or brain damage. And this reflex is important because it helps to prepare the baby to respond to danger. So this is the very beginning of what is called our fight or flight response that's carried over into how our adrenals will respond to when we are in a stressful situation. And then this is the learning how the adrenals will adapt is also then related to the adrenal glands help to stimulate how the immune system works. So getting this Moro reflex, which helps to get the adrenal system started, which is then what sets our immune system on the right path. So children who do not have, who retain the Moro reflex in a chronic state will often have a lowered immune system, which could lead to increased asthma or allergies as they get older. The next reflex is almost the opposite of the Moro reflex. And the parachute reflex doesn't start until the Moro reflex actually goes away. And then if we lower the baby down towards a surface, they will spread out their hands and fingers and bend forward as if to catch themselves when